All right, how about this?
Okay, but that's like the same effect that every single After Effects nerd uses.
Fine. How about this? Huh? I don't know, but it's cool.
Do they get hurt? Are they feeling pain right?
Shh.
Okay.
Hey everyone, welcome to GameGorgon. My name's Indigo.
And my name is Archwizard Crew.
And today we're going to be going over Pathfinder 2nd Edition Spellcasting.
Oh.
Not just for wizards.
No.
No.
I just happen to be one. Spellcasting is a pretty complex topic. This is going to be, what am I trying to say?
It's so complex, Crew can't even finish his sentence.
It is something that sometimes relies very heavily on the way that your spell is written.
Okay.
So this is going to go over as much of the generic spellcasting things as we can.
Okay.
But I just want to point this out. Read your f***ing spell. Like, you don't have to know it by heart.
No.
Just like right before the turn where you think you might want to use it, just go give it a skim really quicky poo. I'm not innocent of this, and I don't think you are either. It's just a good thing to remember.
When you're casting a spell, you know the generics behind the spell.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I do this much damage in this area.
Exactly.
But then when the GM asks you a very specific question, like on the first episode, or second episode of Court of Corvids, Jonas's character casts Ray of Frost.
Does it do anything besides damage? And Jonas is like,
All of your martial characters will thank you.
on top of that, and I think something that this video is going to help with, you should also know the generic stuff. You should know how dismissing works. You should know what the different schools mean. Things like that. They're very important. Keep a note of them if you can. Let's get into actually casting spells.
Okay.
So first I want to talk about how spells are categorized. There are two main categorizations. There is the tradition and there is the school.
Okay.
We have sometimes used those two terms interchangeably, and that is because we're used to saying school.
Yes.
But tradition is different, and we'll start with tradition. There are 4 traditions of magic: primal, occult, divine, and arcane. I forgot the most generic one.
Those names, while we know what arcane does and maybe
Yeah.
divine, but occult and primal are newish. What differentiates them all?
They basically represent where you draw your power from. So like arcane, something we're familiar with, you draw your power from logic and from study and from knowledge. You
Okay.
read books to cast spells, whereas divine, you draw your power from a divine being. Primal, you draw your power from the world itself, whether that is from like the trees or the ground or the air or whatever. It is like a natural occurrence that is around you. And then the occult tradition is a little bit weird because it's basically just like enigmatic. I would think of it as like drawing power from an old god. It's just like
Okay.
you don't really know what it is you're tampering with, but you're tampering with something. That's how I'm reading it. I'm gonna be perfectly honest, the occult tradition explanation in the book didn't really do the same amount of work in describing what it means as, for example, the arcane one did.
Sure.
You know, figure it out.
Even though primal is also new,
Yes.
the idea behind primal isn't.
Always been there.
It's just been called different things.
Yes.
It's
Or
the
it's
druid.
been defined as nothing, and then it's been defined in the druid class. Right?
Exactly. Occult is new because that's more like bardy magic.
Yeah.
Which has always been like kind of dabbled as, it's sort of arcane.
Yeah, I think
sort
that's
of divine.
I think that's what it was, right? It was like, it is natural arcane that's not sorcerer. If I run a 2nd edition campaign, it's going to be akin to, but not exactly like Lovecraftian in nature.
Sure, okay.
Traditions aren't restrictive to a spell, so a spell can belong to more than one tradition. Maybe the role play is different if you cast a primal version of a spell versus an arcane version of the same spell, because both of those kinds of casters can cast Fireball, for
Sure.
example. It is still Fireball, it still does the same stuff, it's just a way of defining what kinds of spells a specific caster can use.
Understandable.
Next we have schools,
Okay.
of which there are 8. Each of them describes like a general direction of the function of spells in that school. The 8 schools are Abjuration, which is about protection and shielding and warding.
Conjuration is about summoning and teleportation.
Divination is about predicting the future or scrying the past or the present.
Enchantment is about emotions and mental manipulation.
Evocation is just
BOOM!
is just an explosion. Various flavors of explosions.
Illusion is, well, illusions. It's not what it seems.
Yeah. It's funny, the most straightforward name is for the least straightforward Anyways. Necromancy is specifically regarding life and death.
I do want to take a pause on that.
Do it.
Necromancy has always been kind of like, oh, it's an evil, it's a darkness, it's all about sucking death and it's all these bad stuff. I love that necromancy is the veil of life and death. It is healing as well as harming.
Yes, 100% agree. It is a tool.
Because everything else is always just like, necromancy's evil!
Yeah.
Ha! And you're like, but it's the only spellcast that's evil.
Like, necromancy can do evil things, but it, as a school of magic, is studied like any other, which is like, finally.
As a Slytherin, I agree.
As a whatever I am,
Hufflepuff.
No, other one.
Ravenclaw?
Yeah. I'm an archwizard.
You saying Hufflepuffs can't be archwizards?
No, actually, probably a lot of them are.
And then lastly, it's transmutation, which is all about transformation, changing one thing into something else.
So if a spell belongs to a school, there's no reason for it to belong to another school. The spell Shield has no reason to belong to evocation. There's no like transition between those two things.
Correct.
One of them is protection, the other one is explosions. Shield is protecting, and therefore it is an abjuration spell. Period.
Okay, an overarching thing, okay, there's tradition, and then below that is schools, but it doesn't work that way.
No.
They're literally intertwined with each other.
Yeah.
Because while something can be a abjuration spell, that single abjuration spell can belong to all of the different traditions.
Or just one.
Exactly.
Those two categories, you're right, in no way affect each other. It's not like, oh, you can't have abjuration spells in the primal school. It doesn't work that way. It is just two separate ways of categorizing spells. One is referencing the spellcaster and how the spell relates to the spellcaster. And one is referencing the spell itself, how the spell works. Period, regardless of who's casting it.
And every spell in the spell book will have both a tradition and a school.
Correct. Let's really quickly touch on how to cast a spell.
Okay, now that we know what spells are.
Exactly. You will pick a class that has the spellcasting feature that will grant you a certain number of spells, let's say at level 1, so you have first level spell slots. There are two ways that those spell slots can function, depending on whether you're a spontaneous caster or a prepared caster.
Okay.
We're going to gloss over this a little bit because some of this varies based on class a little bit. For example, the wizard's the only class with a book, and so you have like special mechanics based around your book and how that affects the spells you know. Just really quick, spontaneous casters can cast any spell in their repertoire at any time, but their repertoire limits the spells that they know by level. So if you want to learn a spell at a higher level, you have to spend a spell known slot. Other than that, you can just shove any spell that you know into any valid spell slot, and it will cast.
Now, if you want more detail on specific spontaneous casters, you can go and watch the sorcerer video.
Yeah. Then we have prepared casters, who every morning when they prepare, they will take spells and assign them to slots individually. Once they expend that assigned spell in that specific slot, they cannot use it again. Barring class features, we're just talking about basic spellcasting here. Once that is expended, that assignment is gone, and they must use a different spell that they have already assigned into a spell slot. That is the limitation
between spontaneous and preparation.
And prepared. The flexibility of prepared casters is that their known spells are level agnostic. They don't need to know a spell at a specific level. They just know the spell, and they can assign it into any spell slot that is a valid assignment and that they have access to.
And if you want more information about a prepared caster, you can watch the cleric video.
Now, we mentioned heightening, and we did also talk about heightening in those videos.
Yes.
I do want to make a distinction that I don't think we've made yet.
Okay.
There are two styles of heightened spell.
Okay.
One of them is a little bit more versatile, and the other one's more rigid. So we have heightened plus X.
Okay.
That is to say, heighten plus a number, and that number will represent the number of spell slots you have to jump up in order to get that effect.
Yeah, and that's spell specific, not class specific.
100%.
I think that's why we never really went over it,
Yes.
is because we were waiting for this video.
Yeah. The other is just heighten X, where X is going to give you a level. Sometimes you'll have like heighten third, which would represent a third level spell slot, and it'll tell you what it does at third level. You could also have like heighten third and heighten sixth. You can have any combination of random levels in there, just depending on how the spell was like balanced by the game designers. The point is that you can only use those specific levels of spell slot to cast that, as well as the base level of the spell.
Yes. And some spells don't even have restrictions. Some of them are literally just
like heighten plus 1 is just literally you can heighten this to any spell slot level above the spell.
Exactly.
What you cannot do, I think it's safe to say under any circumstances, is cast a spell at a lower level. than it is.
Oh, then its original form?
Yeah.
No.
And boy, oh boy, if you have a way to do that in your head, tell me, because that's so cool. Once you have your spells prepared or your spells known or however it is that you cast spells within those realms, you basically read the spell. Self-explanatory to figure out how many actions a spell costs, what kind of components it requires. Verbal requires you to be able to speak, somatic requires you to be able to move, and material requires you to have a material component.
Yes.
Most caster classes have a substitute for a material component, and so you can use that substitute if you want. There's a lot of different requirements. There's like prerequisites for like reactions, like things that trigger the spell, just like class feats. At a certain point, you just gotta read it.
Yeah.
But that's not all there is to say about spells. There are also some special kinds of spells that we have to talk about. The first is a cantrip, and we're gonna make this quick because we have talked about cantrips a lot, but we need to clear the air about some things.
So many times.
Yeah. So cantrips are spells that don't consume resources.
Correct.
You can just cast them in a limited number of times as long as you meet the prerequisites. They are inherently weaker than other spells, I guess you could say, because you can just kind of spam them at will. They aren't like reality-shattering spells.
Yeah.
They like do some damage or like maybe do a minor illusionary effect or something like that. They are automatically heightened specifically to your level rounded up, which is to say that if you are a caster class, they're heightened to your like maximum level of spell slot. In certain situations, however, you can potentially heighten a spell past your available spell slot level because of the way this is worded.
Okay.
So if you only have third level spells, but you're level 15, the cantrip's going to be heightened to a valid spell slot for a level 15 caster. Next, we're talking about focus spells. These are a little bit more similar to spells in the sense that that's not how you cast.
I broke my focus
Oh,
spell.
no.
Yeah, I was focusing and then you were talking.
No.
And I lost my
Sorry.
concentration.
It got disrupted. We'll talk about that later. Focus spells, instead of using spell slots, use focus points. Every focus spell costs 1 focus point.
Yes. There's a lot of confusion because a lot of people read the focus spell because it says on the right-hand side, focus and then a number.
Yes.
And they think that that's the number of focus points that it requires.
Right.
But that's the level it requires.
Right, just like with the other spell, like card, unless the feature you picked to gain a focus spell specifically says that you don't gain a focus point, you gain a focus point when you pick your first focus spell. From what I understand, they all explicitly say you also gain a focus point.
Sure.
But just in case there's something in the book that doesn't say that, in the focus point part of the book, it says that you get one. So you get one.
And then I think the only limitation is max number of focus pools that
Yeah.
they can have. Like 3.
During your prep, you're going to regain all of your focus points back.
Okay.
But you can also do something called refocus. Refocus is an exploration mode action that you can take that costs 10 minutes. You're going to spend 10 minutes doing something that represents the class or the whatever that gave you the focus point pool to begin with. So for example, a druid would be tending for nature in a way that represents the druidic order the druid belongs to. So like if you have to respect plants, you'd be like watering some plants.
If you chose wild, you're petting a cat.
You're petting a cat for 10 minutes. That would be nice. You have to have spent a focus point between the last time you regained any focus points and the time that you want to use this action.
Sure.
You cannot spam this action. It is not, oh, we have like an hour before the next encounter. I'm going to spend 6 10-minute chunks regaining 6 focus points. No, you get 1 focus point back. And then once you spend that 1 focus point, you can regain it back again. If you spend 2 focus points, you could regain 1 focus point back. This is not an infinite resource, effectively.
Yeah.
You can always have 1 in between encounters if you have 10 minutes, but you cannot regain your focus points to full, just like at a whim at level whatever, like level 1. You can't just regain all of your focus points. There are some class features that let you, like, oh, when you would gain 1 focus point, regain 3 instead.
Yeah.
That is super useful because at that point you could refill your focus points back up to full, but baseline, that's not how it works. Focus spells are going to automatically be of the same tradition of the class that gave you the focus spell.
Okay.
Right? And if you are not a spellcaster, then the spell will give you any applicable DCs, like, oh, use this and this to calculate this DC.
Okay.
You'll understand that stuff based on the spell itself, or the class itself.
Gotcha. Okay.
There are also innate spells. These are spells that you can cast as a part of who you are.
And you don't need to be named Nate for it to be inside of you?
No.
Sorry, this is a really bad
You're always trained in innate spells.
Okay.
Unless you already use spells and you have a different, like, higher level of training, then you use that instead. There are... Oh my god. We can see ourselves now.
Yep.
So it's... There's also some other really terrifying things about innate spells. You can cast them, even if it is a level that is outside of your ability to cast. If you're a spellcaster and you have access to 4th level spells and you have like an 8th level innate spell, you can cast that. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
The thing about innate spells is that they cannot be heightened by any means.
Okay.
And then this I thought was a little interesting.
Okay.
Unless otherwise specified, you use charisma as your ability score modifier for innate spells. I don't understand where that comes from.
Because it's all about charisma, like it's yeah, you get what I'm saying. Like charisma is supposed to be about the inner, like your personality. You're like the thing that makes you you.
Yeah.
Right. And so I get that it comes from charisma, but I imagine a lot of innate spells that are coming from other things are just like cool.
Use this instead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with that. That was like a huge bulk of what spells are and how spells work. There are some other things that we felt like it was important for you to understand, though, that are a little harder to categorize. So this is the catch-all category. Ta-da! So spells have durations. Right?
Okay.
Sometimes the duration is like non-existent, which means the effects apply instantly and that's it. There's no like duration. Sometimes it's like 10 minutes, sometimes it's a minute, but sometimes it's sustained or sustained up to a minute or something to that effect. Sustained is interesting. When you cast a sustained spell, it lasts until the end of your next turn.
Okay.
Unless you use an action to sustain it during your turn.
Okay.
In which case, it pushes that deadline out 1 turn. Every turn, you sacrifice one of your actions to keep that spell going, and potentially to do other things.
Sure.
Like a spell can say if you use an action to sustain the spell, you can do some stuff.
That makes sense. You know, it's like, I'm not sure if this is an actual spell that does it, but like Flaming Sphere.
It does.
Yeah, it's one action to maintain Flaming Sphere to continue to stay up.
Yes.
And you can use that action to move it.
Mm-hmm. A sustained spell can only be maintained for 100 rounds. Maximum.
Only
100 rounds. It makes more sense in exploration mode.
Yes.
If you do try to surpass 100 rounds with that action, the spell ends immediately and you become fatigued. There is a consequence for going beyond 100 rounds. I think that was also in the playtest, but I don't. Was it?
Yeah.
Sometimes spell will list a different maximum duration. If something just says sustained, it's 10 minutes because of the way that this is written. If it says sustained 1 minute and you try to go past 10 rounds, then you become fatigued still. The duration of the spell overrides the general duration notes in this part of the book.
Yeah, specific always beats general.
100% of the time. Next, we'll talk about dismissing a spell. A lot of people, I feel like, do this as a free action. It is an action. It is one action. You can dismiss a spell. The spell that you're dismissing has to be able to be dismissed. It will define that in the spell itself. You can't just dismiss any spell. Again, you're gonna house rule the crap out of this. I can feel it. Not you specifically.
No. I get what you're saying. I'm just trying to think of a spell that you would want to dismiss that couldn't be dismissed.
Yeah.
Oh, could you imagine if you like summon a demon to like fight for you, and then you're like, cool, bye demon, and it's like, no, you're next.
Next is disrupting a spell. I think the important thing to know about disrupting a spell for the caster, when a spell is disrupted, you lose the slot, you lose the material components, you lose all of the actions that you had committed to casting the spell. Every single thing about the spell, you lose, and 0 things happen. If you had a spell that costs you 3 actions, and you say, I want to use this spell, and then it is disrupted somehow, you cannot take any more actions on your turn unless you have some way of getting more than 3 actions, because you committed 3 actions to casting that spell. They are all gone. If you had any material components, even if they had a value,
all of it's gone.
They are gone. Disrupting a spell in this game is very detrimental. It is not something that you like want to be like, oh, well, my party can protect me. You should have some assurances that your spells will not be disrupted. We've talked about this before. Your action economy is suffering so much because you can literally, in 1 round, as a consequence of a single reaction, lose 3 actions.
It's like just standing in the middle of combat on a battlefield. It's like, you're going to die.
Yep. Like, who are you without your magic? Nothing.
Yeah.
Unless your party's just on point with protecting you.
But then you're causing them to spend their action economy to protect you for doing nothing on your turn.
Yes, 100%. And last but not least is identifying spells. I think this is something that is home ruled very frequently.
Yes.
But I also think if you have a spell prepared, or you have a spell that you know, and you see somebody casting the spell, you know what spell they're casting. This, I think, adds a little bit by saying you also know what spell it is, or what level it is being heightened to, if it is being heightened, right?
Sure.
That's super useful information. Spam your GM with that one.
If a player asks me, I want to identify that spell, I don't want to spend the table time going, okay, what spells do you have prepared?
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because I don't want to be like, oh, well, they're casting Fireball, and then be like, oh, I don't want to give them the leeway of knowing what the spell is if they can't identify it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, and it does take a long time to rattle off every spell that you know.
I would almost rather give it away as a free thing. Like,
Sure.
It's like, oh, you know Arcana.
Yeah.
This is an Arcana spell.
Yeah.
I will give this to you. Maybe I might roll an Arcana check,
Yeah.
and then they'll roll a Recall Knowledge Arcana, and be like, okay, cool, you know that now.
And that's actually, if you don't know the spell, you use Recall Knowledge to try and figure out what the spell is. If it is a spell in combat. If it is not a spell in combat, like for example, it is a spell that is just lingering on the ground, you're not watching it being cast, you're trying to identify a spell, you use Identify Magic instead, as though it were like an item, basically. You don't have the luxury of seeing the motions or hearing the words, and that's a huge part of the magic, right? Those are the main ways of identifying a spell. I agree with this guy, by the way. I would say if it's a spell that I know for a fact that they have access to, I'm just like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Like, I dig it. If it's a spell above their level, I make them roll for it, and those are literally the only two things.
The other thing that I think would be really, really interesting, and I might take advantage of this, is that items and spells are also known as common and uncommon, and have different like ratings on that. So I might also use that as like a deterrent on whether or not they know that spell.
Yeah, like if it's an uncommon spell, they have to roll for it unless, like, I don't know, it's like,
unless they had that exact spell at that exact level, it's like roll for it. You know, I'm curious of how you all use Identify. Why don't you go down in the comments and let us know what your homebrew rules for Identify is. Actually, you know what? I'd also be interested in what your homebrew rules are for a lot of this stuff, because I know Heightening, a lot of people use Heightening differently. Talk about Cantrips differently. The Heightening one that I've heard the most is that spontaneous casters, like sorcerers, just get to do it. They don't have to have it known at different levels. Yeah, I've heard that on the Discord.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I want you to go down in the comments and let us know what you think are some good homebrews for spellcasting that you personally use. While you're down there, hit the like button if you like the video, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and then head over to Twitter and talk to us there. You can talk to me there at IndigoQT.
And you can talk to me on Twitter at QueueTimes, or you can talk to all of us at all of these social media things down here. One of them is a Patreon. If you're interested in supporting us, we would really appreciate it. But if you can't for whatever reason, that's totally fine. Join our Discord. Come talk to us. I don't know if that's where the actual thing is.
I think it's like Patreon, Discord.
No, like, because the middle is QueueTimes, right?
Yes.
So this is going to be maybe Discord, and then this is Patreon. So like, maybe,
but there's 4, isn't there?
Yeah, and then there's another thing here, and I don't remember what it is, and there's anher thing here.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't remember what it is.
But do the things.
There's social media stuff, like...
Bye.